The Ipsos poll done exclusively for Global News shows 60% of Canadians are concerned they may not have enough money to feed their families. That figure is up 16% from just 4 months ago. In general, 85% say they're worried everyday items are becoming less affordable. And 68% of people surveyed say they may not be able to afford gasoline. 73% say they're worried interest rates will rise more quickly than they can adjust.
There's been a dramatic transformation of the agenda for Canadians over the space of the last several months. As we're coming out of the pandemic, rather than returning to the agenda that we had pre-pandemic, which was dominated by things, for example, like healthcare and climate change and things that seem to be about making the world a better place, what we're now seeing is an agenda that's very much dominated by really urgent economic issues, principally the cost of living. Well, initially, as people watch what's going on in Ukraine, they have a kind of a philosophical yearning to do the right thing. But what happens is that philosophical yearning can get tested by the realities of what the implications are for their day-to-day lives. And in this instance, is the longer that we see concern about inflation continue to rise. And by the way, economists call it inflation. What real people call it is the cost of living. So the pressure that's put on them in their day-to-day lives, from everything from buying a tank of gasoline to feeding their families. As long as those things are getting harder to do, what we're going to see is people's focus is going to get closer to home and less on what's going on in places like Ukraine. That tends to be the pattern. Rent, the cost of housing, anything related to groceries, as we see, over 60% of Canadians are saying they're worried about feeding their families based on what's going on. And by the way, the fastest growing communities in this country are car commuting communities. And as we get back to work, the price of gasoline is really going to bite. And while in the short term, our politicians and others will be able to point to Ukraine and say, well, folks, this is what's causing it. Ultimately, they don't vote for who's going to be the president of Ukraine or the president of Russia. They get to vote for their local politicians. So these things are going to come back into our local political environment and start defining political choices. When we take a look at who the Canadians are that are most concerned about what's going on right now, it's people who are really stretched. Younger people, people who are less affluent, people with kids at home. That's who's really struggling here. So when you think about the people that are most concerned about this, it's those people who are at that period in their lives in which they're starting their families, raising their families, buying all those things that are necessary to develop that aspirational household that everybody has. They are the people who are really under pressure right now. It's not seniors. It's not people who are in the older population. It's people who are in that younger population group who are looking at things like the cost of buying a house these days and saying, that's not something I'm going to be able to deal with in my lifetime. That frustration is going to find a way to boil up. So it creates a difficult political environment for any government that's running for election.